Yeah, this is our first time, can you tell? Got it. Sorted. Okay. Ready.
Yikes.
Whew. I can relax now. Okay, Savannah, do you want to kick it off by just telling us a little bit about your coaching career and what's brought you to do some nutrition coaching?
Sure. I've been doing CrossFit for quite a long time. I guess now 13 years, maybe 14 coming up in December, so an eternity. And I always kind of think back to when I first started and the information that we learned about nutrition because you want to try to maximize all of your results. And I feel like it was very mixed then, kind of over my CrossFit, my personal CrossFit career. I've had a few years of nutrition coaching, and then I began as a CrossFit coach probably, I guess now 6-7 years ago. And I just feel like over that time, right, you absorb more and more information, and some of it sounds really crazy, and you get questions from athletes more and more often. And I think I was just really inspired to support people and bring some simplicity and clarity. So I really like to make athletes feel really welcome and feel really comfortable and feel really capable. And I want to bring that same thing to nutrition coaching and help to kind of alleviate some of the complicated aspects that I think are unnecessary, but are commonly brought up because I think that you hear so much, it's hard to filter it out. So I think the aspect of bringing simplicity to nutrition and bringing that welcoming environment of maybe less than perfect, right? Like that option for flexibility and that option to live your life and work towards your goals is what I'm hoping to bring.
Nice. And so you do one-to-one nutrition coaching?
Correct. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Just reading some of the comments.
I know. Yeah, CJ, who was it? We'll talk to CJ later about that.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned a little bit about your own experience with nutrition. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was at a point in CrossFit where I was becoming more and more competitive. And I think as you start to get on that motivated bandwagon of wanting to maximize your performance in all areas, nutrition tends to become a really big one that people look at after their training. And so I had a coach for 2 years, and I feel like I learned so much. And ultimately, I think from that experience has kind of shaped my nutrition focus from then on. And I think back to prior to having a comprehension of macronutrients and having a comprehension of adequate nutrition and portion sizes, I can't even remember what did I used to eat? I feel like once you learn that, that's kind of the lens that you look through. And I think it's sort of an impossible skill to unlearn. And
yeah, for sure.
Right. And you look through that lens, and it's a useful lens. I think it's such a useful tool to move through your life with. But I also, in my in-person CrossFit coaching, nutrition comes up, and a lot of athletes have questions, and I realize that they don't have that lens. And so they're sort of lost in that, what do I do? Even to the point of what has protein in it, which was a very, very shocking question for me, because I feel like once you practice it and once you're focused on those things, even if it's not seriously, you still know it and you still see it through your day-to-day life and your food choices.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually thinking about this earlier, thinking back to maybe like 10, 15 years ago. and how much I just didn't know. And it's just been like a really gradual progression. And I've just picked things up here and there, like in the sport of CrossFit and also in weightlifting and doing my own research. And like it's just so gradual. It's not like an overnight thing. It's just like a thing that you learn over time, and it just like kind of becomes part of your daily life.
Yeah, and I think that at the beginning, it seems like a very overwhelming overhaul of everything that you're doing, but very similar to you, I think over time you develop the habits and the habits become easier and they become more layered into your life, which allows you to kind of fluctuate through those habits, but move through a lot easier than maybe at the very beginning.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we took some questions on Instagram yesterday, and I've got some of them here. So I thought we could just pull up some of them, and we'll also dive into some of the questions in the live chat. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first one we had through, how do I decide how many calories to consume? What do you think about that?
I think when you're looking at how, I think it's going to be a few factors. First, it's going to be your lifestyle, like how active you are generally in your job or through the day. Then you take into account how much you're training and how hard you're training. And then once you kind of get a number from there, then you're going to adjust for what your goals are. A lot of people want to lean up, or there are really three ways you can get a little bit lighter or a little bit leaner. You can maintain where you're at, but kind of dial in the foods that you're eating. And then there are many athletes who want to be putting on muscle or bulking. So once you find that baseline, then you can kind of adjust for maintenance, adjust up or adjust down.
Yeah, for sure. So the main, really that starting point is what is it you're looking to achieve. I always feel like people, they kind of like dive into how many calories they should be eating when they've not actually kind of thought about what their goals are and what is important to them. And often people, they don't know whether they want to, maybe they have some fat to lose and they have some muscle to gain. Like, where do you start with that?
Well, I'll start first maybe with the calorie number, right? Your calories are going to determine roughly your body weight. And then within that, your macronutrient goals are going to determine your body composition. Okay. So I think the first thing that we look at is going to be what your protein goal is. And for a lot of people, they're greatly under eating on protein. So that's generally the first place that you're going to look and the main thing that you're going to focus on so that you can start to have enough protein in your diet to promote recovery and muscle gain. And then I think for kind of just like skipping ahead a little bit for carbs and fat, a little bit of that depends on what your training style is, and a little bit of that depends on your personal preferences for the foods you like, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to force somebody into a low fat, high carb macro profile if they tend to naturally gravitate towards liking to have a little bit more fat. So protein is going to be the main focus just for that muscle, for the maintenance of muscle that you have, or the opportunity for muscles to grow, the opportunity for your body to recover from the training that you're doing. And I think, when people want to do both, I think you mentioned, right? If people, they want to get a little bit leaner and they want to gain muscle, then it's important to reach your protein and kind of dial in that total calorie number to make sure that it's moving you in the direction that you want, while you're making sure that you're not going to be losing muscle as you do that.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I always find a kind of common thing is people saying that, oh, I'm always in a calorie deficit. I eat in a calorie deficit and I'm not losing any weight. Or the other way around, I'm always eating in a surplus. and I'm not gaining weight. What would you say to that?
I think in both of those cases, it is very hard to track in meticulously for long periods of time.
Mhm.
But I do think that it's such a useful tool to get a clear picture of what you're actually eating. So typically in those cases, people might be thinking that they're eating in a calorie deficit, but what they might be doing is eating a couple things. They might be eating higher caloric foods, so they still are hungry because they're never actually satiated. So it feels like they're eating less,
Mhm.
or they might be eating less, and then every so often, because they're cutting back so far, having some extra snacks here or there, or having a binge episode because they've been restricting too far, so that even though they've had 5 of the 7 days that were in a deficit, the weekend is kind of a tricky area for a lot of people. Then potentially what they're eating on the weekend is negating what their deficit was for the week. So I think when people have situations like you spoke of, I'm not gaining or I'm not losing, then I think that tracking is probably one of the best tools that you can use to get a very clear picture, so long as the tracking is accurate, right? So kind of reinforce those perfectionist habits on the tracking, maybe even just for a week, to see what is actually happening with the numbers.
So we're talking about tracking. I'm interested to know, because I have my feelings about tracking. Is that something you would recommend for every one of your clients?
No, I think that it's a skill. So I have a lot of feelings about tracking as well. And I think that it can be used to get a clear picture of what's happening and kind of give you a baseline for your nutrition. But I think that it can also become very stressful for people. And I think it can be cause for a lot of anxiety and kind of ramping up that perfectionist all or nothing towards nutrition.
Mhm.
So I like to think of it more as a tool. But for somebody who's brand new to nutrition, I probably wouldn't start them tracking immediately, and would gradually layer in the more complicated aspects of nutrition. You can start with looking at the foods that you're eating and the quality of the foods that you're eating, and you can focus on adding in more nutritious foods and reducing, and I never really eliminating, because I'm a big fan of having the things that you like. But maybe if we all know people who don't eat vegetables, or like there aren't fresh aspects to their diet. So I think that if you look at what their food quality is, and you can kind of assess that with them to maybe clean up the quality and make it a little bit higher, you can start there. And then with more of like a plate, what does your plate look like, right? A portion of protein, a portion of vegetables, and a protein of carbohydrates, which changes in size depending on what that person's goal is, but doesn't really require as much weighing and measuring.
Yeah, for sure. Because everybody has a different starting point when they're coming for help with nutrition, and sometimes it can be really sort of fundamental things that you're going to deal with, presumably. And then for other people that come to you, maybe they're an athlete, high level athlete, and they've been doing this sort of thing for a long time, but they just need a little bit more nuance, then they'll have a different starting point.
Yeah, I think it's very important to meet an athlete where they're at, wherever that may be, and to very gradually layer in the habits and layer in the information. Because I think where people fail is when something is not doable, or is too difficult, or is too overwhelming and is too much. And that's absolutely the last thing that I would want to do. So I always feel like small, find out where an athlete is, and then make this one small adjustment to start and see how it goes. And it's really, nutrition, like you and I said earlier, is such a long game. Really, whether you want to, boosting your performance might have the quickest result depending on what you're eating. But I think if you're looking to lose fat, and especially if you're looking to gain muscle, which takes even longer, you have to, find the things that you're able to be consistent with, because it really is going to take some time.
Yeah, yeah. And just and patience, is a big part of it. Unfortunately, like a lot of people, when they come for nutrition help, they tend to have like a short-term goal, and then while short-term goals are good, I think people have to kind of be prepared for the long haul if they want the results to stick.
Yeah, and I think sometimes maybe the short-term goals can be more of wins in your day-to-day habits, or in your mindset, or in your sleep, or in your stress, and they can be different markers other than pounds lost.
Yeah, for sure. And how would you say, just talking about sleep and stress there, how does that affect your efforts to either lose fat or gain muscle?
It makes it incredibly difficult for your body to be recovering adequately. So they're almost equally important, um, within reason, right? Like within reason. If you're doing the best that you can do, like, then we're always going to try to just look for improvements in what we're working with. If somebody has, let's say they have their job doesn't allow them to get more sleep, but then maybe we can address their stress. Or, for example, if somebody was going through a very stressful time in their life, and it was potentially going to be something that was ideally not incredibly long term, then the same thing that I would prescribe with training, that might not be the best time to be making big changes, but it could be a good time maybe to come back to a maintenance, take some of the pressure off of yourself so that you can move through this really stressful time in your life, and then refocus when your life has calmed down a little bit. So I think sometimes what's really nice about having a coach, whether it's for nutrition or for CrossFit, you have somebody in your corner who's there giving you permission to lighten up a little bit on yourself, because I think that we're all so hard on ourselves. But if you have someone say, hey, you know what, it's okay.
Mhm.
Let's make this a little bit easier right now. It's fine. I'll work through this with you together. And then let's just keep checking in until the time is right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, because yeah, I'm a big believer in it's not always a good time to be losing fat, and that's probably something that has um, kind of changed in my opinion over the years, because I think when I was younger and new to CrossFit and things, and I haven't had any kind of issues trying to lose fat before, and I think it's something that I used to maybe think, oh, anybody can do it if they just do X, Y, and Z. And it has changed over the time working with clients, because I've kind of realized actually, it's just another stress. And if you are going through a stressful time or a difficult time, and then you're being hard on yourself on top of that because you're not losing weight, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it just makes everything more difficult and makes you feel worse, I think, about yourself, or makes people, it's like, I'm like, this is hard, and I'm tired, and I'm failing. And so I think, I just really want people to, like, feel the best that they can in their situation, whatever it may be at that moment.
Mhm. Cool. Okay, let's go back to some of the questions, because we keep going off on tangents. I think it's all useful.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, how do you fit more lean protein into your diet? That was one of the questions we had on Instagram.
I will say, in my opinion, the wrong way. But when I first started trying to increase my protein, I feel like I it takes a while, right? It takes time. And I think ideally, right, you can increase the protein that you're already eating. But if you're not eating much, that's when you have to start finding ways to add it in. So I prefer to recommend that it's coming from whole sources, but when you're first starting and your protein goal may be much more than the protein that you're eating, I think at the beginning is a good time to have, maybe you're going to have a protein bar, maybe you're going to have a protein supplement because you're too full or it's too difficult to kind of work it into your meals efficiently, right? Maybe you're still having a more carbohydrate centric breakfast. So then that's going to kind of load more protein to your afternoon. And then you get to the evening and you're short. So you can have a protein shake. But I think that over time you start learning the ways to work it in. So now I think, as we talk about our habits that we've built over time, it tends to be the first part of my meal construction, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, and it wasn't ever like that, but now it's like, okay, like what protein am I going to have? And that's where my starting point is. And then what am I going to add to that? Or what do I have? What protein do I have ready? What's convenient? And so it starts to become like the central piece of your meals, which I think makes it a little bit easier, because if you don't put it as that like building point, then you tend to end up, and I remember nights when I was very first learning nutrition where I was just trying to eat all this chicken and it was so dry. Like it was just like force feeding a bowl of chicken at night, and it was just the worst. And
plain chicken?
Yes, and it was awful. It was so bad. It was like a bowl of plain shredded chicken, and I just remember I was watching TV and like trying to eat it, and it was so much, and I was so full. So I think making sure that you start as early in the day as possible. And then, it may be that your snack is a protein bar, because it's not going to make you as full as a huge bowl of chicken in the evening. But I think having it prepared is also something that I'll never not really do. So at any opportunity that you're cooking, if you're cooking, a protein source, make more than that meal, because if you have it in the fridge handy, it makes going to it significantly easier.
Yeah, that's what I always do, actually. I'm not one for food prep, but I do always try to, when I'm cooking my meals at night, either keep a little bit of what I've made by, or even just like a raw chicken breast, I'll like chuck that in the fridge, and then I can stick it in the air fryer in the next day for lunch. But I think like you mentioned breakfast there, and I think that's, for me, that's one of the biggest struggles I see clients have, and it's the biggest struggle I've had with fitting protein into my diet. But I think it's quite good to front load your day with that if you can get a good breakfast. Another kind of tip that I have is, if you don't like traditional breakfast foods, or they don't provide enough protein, like there's nothing wrong with just having like a food that you might normally have for lunch.
Yeah, I completely agree. You can be a lot more flexible in what you're having.
Okay, good tips.
Have some chicken and vegetables for breakfast.
A big bowl of shredded chicken, don't do that.
Big bowl of shredded chicken, yes, that we all love. What are traditional breakfast foods?
Oh,
waffles.
Traditional breakfast foods.
Eggs.
That's for Savannah and I.
Cereal. Yeah. Oh gosh, I miss cereal. I can't buy cereal anymore.
Eggs. I'm so I eat eggs, but I'm like, I can't. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't face another egg. What else can I have for breakfast?
Yeah, I know. I love eggs. They're not the best. They're not gonna. They'll get you a little of the way there. But I do love them. Oh yes, Terry, cinnamon toast crunch.
Eggs are really classed more as fat, are they not?
Yeah, they are.
Because I think people
are like equal. They're like the macros are perfectly equal, which is not the best ratio when you're choosing a protein.
So I think people, when they think protein, they automatically think eggs. And I think there's definitely better sources out there. I mean, that's actually one of the questions that came in, was like, are there better sources of protein than others? So, and the example was, is an egg better than a pork chop?
Yeah. It really depends on first what your goals are, right? And if you're kind of following like a general, if you if you're somebody who has a hard time gaining weight and that is your goal, it's going to matter a lot less for you than it's going to matter for somebody who's trying to maybe lose some body fat and maintain their muscle. So in that case, typically lean proteins are going to be a lot easier to balance if you are following specific macros, because you oftentimes don't have a ton of fat to spare and you want to use it in other ways throughout your day. And when I look at a protein, like I mentioned with the egg, the protein and the fat is pretty much equal. I'm always going to look for, personally, something that has a lower fat grams than it has protein grams, because I feel like then it's more of a protein in itself. So they're all protein and they're all going to do the right things for you, but ultimately it just comes to how they fit with your lifestyle or how they fit with your day-to-day life.
Yeah, for sure. So when I if I have to cut for a competition or something, I will choose super lean protein. But every other like day of the year, I just go for what sort of things I like and have a kind of balance.
What are your non-lean protein favorites?
Chicken thigh.
Yeah, tasty.
Tasty, yeah.
More flavor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot more.
Yeah. What else? I like shredded pork. What do you call that? Like pulled pork.
Pulled pork,
yeah. Bacon, sausages.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? You just go all lean? All lean?
I feel like at some point in the past few years, higher fat foods just don't sit as well with my stomach. So I do feel better eating leaner proteins in general. So what I was always aiming for kind of has naturally progressed into that, just with the way that my body feels. And I think that kind of it either came with age or it is just kind of developed that way over time because of my preferences.
Mm-hmm.
But I love cottage cheese. I love Greek yogurt.
I've got into Greek yogurt recently, and actually, just to point out that Greek yogurt has a lot more protein than Greek style yogurt.
Yeah.
Actually, investigated before. I was just buying the Greek style, thinking it was the same thing, and then I was looking at it one day and I was like, oh, there's like half the amount of protein in a Greek style yogurt. So
yeah, and probably some more carbohydrate maybe, unless it was plain.
It was plain.
But that's a personal preference. I think a lot of people don't like plain Greek yogurt, but you can doctor it up pretty well.
But I put like granola and fruit into it.
Yeah, you can doctor it up pretty well. I want to know, I'm just interested in how Kenneth is cooking his eggs the night before.
I was wondering that as well. That was my next question. Like boiling them, maybe?
Yeah, we have to know. I don't know. Back to our technical difficulties. I'm not a part of the chat, and I can't comment in there, but I want to know the answer, Kenneth. Because I want to imagine it the grossest way possible, which would be like over easy. Or scrambled. I don't know. Those are both equally bad to me. The only acceptable one to me would be
boiled.
Probably hard boiled.
Yeah. Okay, we'll find out if he gets
okay, we'll wait.
How do you like your eggs?
How do I?
Yeah.
Over medium. I love yolk, but I don't like runny whites
Oh
ever.
no.
I can't stand
I can't.
any runny whites. I won't eat. If I see it, I'm now done with that egg.
Do you know what's frustrating about making an egg when you want it like that? Like you can't get the yolk runny enough to cook all the white if you fry it
You can't. You need to cook it on lower temperature.
for longer.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I've done in the past, take the yolk out, cook the white, and then put the yolk on top.
Wow. Like you strain the whites in and then save the yolk and then cook it last?
Yeah.
That's extra. Very
I
extra.
did it with an omelette, so I cooked a whole omelette, but because I like the yolk, I put that on top. It was good.
Well, Camille's inspired by Kenneth's nighttime egg cooking.
Cooking egg whites in the morning. I mean, yeah. If you're pushed for time, maybe. I feel like
I also will say I try to love egg bites. There we go. I try to love egg whites because you're like, oh, what a convenient protein. How amazing. But on their own, I have to mix an egg in. Or just make 2 eggs like normal and then just pour a little bit of extra whites in. But you guys are really hardcore.
Yeah. I've been hardcore in the past with cooking egg white omelets. I don't think I could again. That was, that was crazy. That was back in the day before.
I used to eat the grossest things.
Yeah.
You guys, okay, this is what I want to know because it sounds like a lot of you, just while we're chatting, I want you to tell us the grossest healthy foods that you've made, if you have them, because I know we can all think of something probably.
That was mine. Egg white omelet. That was mine.
Egg white omelet. I think overnight oats are great. Most people add some Greek yogurt or protein powder to them, which I think makes them a little bit more substantial. Sea moss. Wow. I'm gross.
Not.
I hope it did everything for you that it promised it was going to do.
Cold overnight pizza. Yeah.
Love cold overnight pizza. That's on a whole different planet than cold overnight.
That was not. That's hopefully not one of your health choices.
For the overnight oats, it sounds like you need a liquid.
Made your overnight, but they never get soft. Oats protein powder. Yeah.
There's no liquid.
And I add milk first, so I'll add milk for extra liquid, then yogurt and fruit.
And I think sometimes people do like almond milk because almond milk is just like a very nothing sort of liquid, but the vanilla tastes pretty good. Not on its own, but mixed into things.
All right, let's go at some questions.
Questions.
Low fat or full fat? What do you think?
I think it comes back to 2 main things. What are your goals? What's your calorie? What's your calorie budget? And what is your preference? Right? Like, what do you like? And does it fit with what your body composition goals are and your calorie budget?
Yeah.
Depends on the person. And it depends on your priorities or how you want to spend your budget.
Cool.
Erin, I wish I liked sardines too. That's something I tried to get in on. But I never really loved them. But I just felt like they're so good for you. And the benefits, but I couldn't do it. I do. They're very, very good for you.
What do you think about intermittent fasting and low carb for fat loss? This is somebody who's looking to break through plateaus.
For intermittent fasting, I kind of like, my general perspective is like very simplistic. And I'm saying that because I think intermittent fasting, I think that people are successful when they do it because it fits maybe their eating styles, right? Maybe if they have the smaller window to eat, they are probably possibly eating less in a smaller window than they would be if they were eating for an entire day. And so therefore they may see some success in fat loss or in weight loss. I don't think it's because it's a magical like voodoo. I think it's just because it's less time that you're eating, you're most likely going to eat less. It's also possible that you think it's magical voodoo and you absolutely scarf down everything and anything that you can in that window because you feel very restricted.
Mhm.
And it could be very unsuccessful for that person, right? And it could cause like some anxiety and, unnecessary stress. So I think that if it fits your lifestyle and you're comfortable doing it and it works for you, it can be successful just because it's shortening that window that you're eating, right? And
Mhm.
hopefully you're making still good choices, not an entire pizza and a bunch of ice cream or whatever. It really kind of depends on, I think, what's sustainable. Like when you're looking at big changes in the structure of your eating, right? Low carb, intermittent fasting. If you can do it, if it's sustainable for you over time, right? So if it's something that you're going to do that feels incredibly restrictive or really goes against kind of your normal habits or your normal nature, then I don't think it's a good fit. But if I know people who claim, or they're like, paleo is the only thing that works for me. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I mean, is it though? But for them, it gives them just the right guidelines that feels sustainable for them. And so it is successful for them.
Mhm.
It really depends on your habits and your lifestyle ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, like some people like that sort of, they like to have a rule like that. People that are good at following rules. Of like,
Right.
okay, cool.
The right set of rules can either make you very successful or can cause you to be an insane person.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it can be for some people who maybe have they like that sort of person, they like a rule and they have a bad habit of mindless snacking after 8 o'clock or, just sitting watching TV at 10 o'clock at night. And if they have that window in before then, they can feel quite successful because they're like, oh, not allowed to. And they just don't. But yeah, the other one, what was the other one? Low carb. How do you feel about that?
I think it falls into the same category, except it's going to then potentially impact your training.
Yeah, because this is what I'm thinking of,
Right. It depends on who you are, right? If your training is pretty low intensity or, for some people, they may not notice, as much energy depletion. But I think for most people who are listening to our podcast, low carb is gonna really suck, right? You're gonna feel very tired. You're not gonna have energy for your workouts. You're not gonna have energy for your strength training. And so I think one of our other questions, are carbs bad? No, they're not. But your lifestyle, your your training style is going to really influence how necessary they are for you.
Okay, so this was a related question from Braden. For vanity reasons, I'd love to lose body fat for more defined abs, but if my goal is to improve CrossFit, should I just focus on what that requires and let the former come with it?
That's a tough one. That's a great question. I think for many people, abs and peak performance do not go hand in hand. And so I think that if you want to chase a certain leanness, it's very likely that your performance will suffer. So for me, they rarely go hand in hand. Some people have incredible genetics that can allow them to have abs and also have semi-peak or peak performance, but most people cannot. So in order to get lean enough to have visible abs, not for everybody, but for most people, their performance is going to decline. And that might be fine, right? Like maybe you're okay lifting a little bit less or feeling a little bit tired because you feel so amazing about yourself. But if you want to have the best performance, I think that you need to be always adequately fueled. And that may mean that you don't have the abs that you dream of. What are your thoughts, Sho?
My thoughts are always when it comes to this sort of thing is you kind of have to just pick what's most important. And it kind of does sound like his goal is to improve at CrossFit. He's training 3 hours a day, high volume.
You cannot have abs at this point in time. If you are training that much, CJ has a good point, but also if somebody's training that much, their main focus is going to need to be enough fuel and enough fuel for recovery. So you'll be focused on eating a lot more than ever trying to do any sort of restrictive dieting at that point.
Yeah. And related question to that, I feel like is when people aren't really sure whether they should be losing fat or gaining muscle because they want to do both, right? How would you approach that, and what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is in that situation?
Well, for beginner athletes, they can typically do both because their body is going to be building a lot more muscle initially. And kind of as your training lifespan becomes older, right? For example, you and I, we've been training for a long time. It's a lot more difficult to put on muscle. So at that point, then they have to be more focused goals. So it depends on kind of that athlete's training lifespan, in my opinion, and also their ability level, and then primary goals. So at a certain point, we can get close, but composition may not change much if they're a more advanced athlete or they already have a lot of muscle mass. Then it's going to take a focused approach of a little more muscle kind of going into that, like slightly bulking and slightly cutting, like program to be able to build more muscle and then lean out and then build some more, just because they already have a lot of muscle or it's hard to build more at a maintenance level.
Yeah. I would also add that for that sort of person, it depends how comfortable you are with gaining. So let's say somebody had some fat to lose, but they wanted to gain the muscle as well. If you go on again, let's say they've been training for a while, so they can't do both at the same time. They kind of have to focus on one over the other. And sometimes to gain the maximum amount of muscle, you also have to be comfortable gaining a little bit of fat along with it.
Yeah.
So if you are concerned about fat, it could be a good idea to do like a lean out first of all, and then go hard on the muscle gain.
And I think additionally, kind of looking at what your season looks like too.
Mhm.
Like when is an appropriate time for you to be a little bit heavier
Yeah.
and when isn't?
Winter.
You know, Gus, I don't know the answer to that.
What's the question?
There you go. CJ's
Oh,
got it.
ideal body fat percentage. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting. 15.
I mean, ultimately, the answer, it's hard to put a number on it because the answer is going to be the one that they're like most well-rounded at. You know, if you're too lean and then you lose strength, that's a bummer. And if you're too heavy and your gymnastics are bad, it's hard. CrossFitters really have to kind of toe that line of the middle ground.
Mhm. So see, just saying very age dependent, but under 15% would be my general advice for health. But there is a bottom line. And guys typically have a lower body fat percentage than women. We should
Correct.
point that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And maybe related on that topic, we had a question. I think it was Lynn. What? Yeah.
I struggle putting on size.
Yes.
I'm
I
naturally
struggle to
lean.
put on size. I'm naturally lean and have a hard time putting on good weight. She also wanted to add that she's 61, female and competes now and again.
I think for Lynn or for an athlete in that scenario, you have to have three things. You have to be eating enough protein. Protein goal may potentially have to go up depending on where it is. Calories have to be above maintenance calories, meaning you have to be eating in a surplus, and you have to be training hard enough to be, which I know Lynn is, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, if somebody's not active and they up their protein and they up their calories, they're not going to be suddenly building muscle all over their body. But if you are, strength training, lifting heavy weights and in a surplus and eating your protein, but the surplus might be higher, it might be difficult, right? I think that it can be as difficult to put on mass for some athletes as it can be to lose body fat percentage. So it would just take more focus or potentially tracking to make sure that you're eating enough, and enough might be quite a lot. And in those cases too, that's when recommendations come, like you might want to eat more calorically dense foods. It may be less about, trying to eat foods that will make you full and more about eating foods that have a lot of calories in them that aren't going to make you as full so that you can get a little bit more food in during the day.
Yeah, this is a kind of situation I find myself in when I'm trying to gain weight and training hard. I do tend to go for those sort of higher calorie, lower volume foods just to get the calories in.
Yeah.
What about age comes into that? She's mentioned that she's 61. How does age play a factor in building muscle?
It becomes more difficult, and I think especially for women, then as much as we've kind of gone over and over how important protein is, it really becomes more important to maintain the muscle that you have and a little more difficult to build more muscle. So the goal really has to be your number one priority.
Yeah. And do you think as well, like we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, being comfortable with adding a little bit, if you're well trained, like if you're a higher training age, being a bit more comfortable with adding some fat to then later strip it back a little bit?
Yeah, it's going to be very unlikely that you only put on muscle mass, right? So you really do have to accept that fact. But I think many athletes, it can take a little bit of a journey through that process of seeing their body change. But generally speaking, the athletes I know who have actively tried to put on mass, it does take a little bit of an acceptance journey, but they can recognize their strength gains and are typically competitive athletes who need to be focused on the weight that they lift. And when they see those numbers going up, it helps to offset the potential discomfort of being a little bit larger than they used to be.
Mm-hmm. And there's also that sort of like, you can eat more, you can gain the weight, and you might gain a little bit of fat, but it doesn't have to stay there forever. Like you can go like up and down a little bit, and hopefully this is the sort of thing I try to do is like, okay, we go up a little bit and then down a little bit, up a bit, and then hoping that the muscle mass just trends slowly upwards.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see if we've got any questions from Instagram that we've missed, and I'll have a look through the. Oh, can you overdo your protein intake and cause kidney damage?
Not really. If you are a healthy individual who does not already have health concerns or specifically kidney concerns, the amount of protein, typically people are like high protein, might be exactly what we're recommending, right? 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. That's a lot of protein. And those levels are generally are known to be healthy and fine for your body. So it would be virtually impossible to eat the amount that would be necessary, but there's also really no science that shows that it can cause kidney damage unless it's somebody who already has a concern. Yep. So if this person has a concern, then it would be more of a question for their general physician for what their level should be.
Cool. I have a question from, I'll pull this one up from Allegra. Advice on when it's time to hire a nutrition coach versus doing it yourself. Been toying with the idea for a while, but haven't pulled the trigger.
That's the question. What's the difference?
Yeah, like when would you say the time is right to hire a nutrition coach versus doing it yourself?
I think if you're somebody who is, some people are very dedicated by themselves, and some people are really self-driven, and they are able to be very accountable to themselves. And I think that's amazing. But most people can help from having some additional accountability outside of their own control, right? Because I think that you can write something off like, oh, if you don't have someone to be accountable to, then you're like, oh, I'll just restart next week. Or, oh, it's okay if I have a little extra this or extra that, or it's probably fine. And it kind of slips back into your old habits. So I think if you do better with more accountability, it's going to be a lot more productive for you. The support, I think, is tremendous. Having someone in your corner just to ask questions to, right? Because I find that if you have someone to ask and you can get an immediate answer, that can help. And I also think, or if you're overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, then it can be nice to have somebody who can help you layer those small habits that we discussed earlier.
Okay. So Alara's also saying that she tracks fairly diligently, but probably under eating and doesn't have any way to hold her accountable. So am I right in thinking you have space, Savannah, for one-to-one nutrition clients?
Yeah, I think I have 3 spots left.
Perfect. And how would somebody go about getting in touch with you about that?
If you guys have any questions about things that we discussed, or if you aren't sure if one-on-one nutrition coaching is for you, or if you're sort of interested and you just want to have a discussion with me, you can email me at my email address, which is Savannah, my name, SAVANNAH, at WODprep.com. And that'll come straight to me and I'll reply.
Perfect. I'll pop that in the
Thank you. Or if I didn't answer your question, I'd be happy to answer it, because I know that we didn't get to them all.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions here, and as you've noticed, this is our first time doing this, so trying to keep an eye on the comments and chat, and it's new for us. I bet CJ's going to take charge next time.
Yeah, CJ probably won't let us have the reins again.
I should also add that I phoned him in a panic earlier because my camera wasn't working and I'd been logged out. We got there in the end. Does anybody have any final questions before we wrap it up? I was going to actually add about we did great. Thanks, CJ.
Thanks, CJ.
Yeah, I was going to just add about the coaching thing there. Sometimes it's not enough just to know what you're doing. For me, I do weightlifting, and I'm a weightlifting coach, and I can write my own programming, but I wouldn't, sometimes I just having a coach there. It's just that other level of accountability. And if you've got goals that are really important to you, then having a coach is kind of a no-brainer. And it's one of those things that I think once you do, I mean, you've done nutrition coaching, you've had one of your own for 2 years. Once you've done it, you think, oh, why did I not start this sooner?
Yeah, definitely. Or I think you can get part of the way there yourself, but you can get the rest of the way, or reach your goals a little bit more quickly when you have a coach.
Sir.
Right. I'm laughing at your comment. Yeah. I think we're both laughing at it. That's funny. I guess priorities. I don't know.
It's interesting.
I love it. Yeah, that's exactly what I would have done. And then my eyebrows would have been up to my hairline. Like, okay.
I'm convinced my BMR is low. That's not a question. Yeah, do you know what's funny? Talking about fat, it's frustrating that people think that eating fat equals being fat.
Right.
A common misconception. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, about, well, I mean, ultimately it really depends. It just kind of comes back to that, energy in, energy out, or calorie goal, right? And for the most part, how you like to divvy up what those calories are is up to you. And it doesn't, I mean, if we're taking body composition out of it, then it really doesn't matter what you're eating. You might be losing some nutritional value. Let's say you only eat olive oil shots, right? But you're staying within your calorie goal. Your weight would stay the same, but you'd obviously be sacrificing a lot of nutrients. And in our case, where we're discussing the importance of performance. Yeah, perfect. Same oil. Love it. Heat it up. I answered your question. I think I did. Right? It does matter what you eat if you're looking at your performance and you're looking at your general health and well-being, right? But the choices are yours based upon your priorities.
Yeah, and interesting. And do you find that a lot of people worry too much about things up here when they need to be focusing on things down here?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
This is something I come across a lot of people who have these quite specific questions about what they should be eating, when they should be eating, what they should be taking.
What did you say? What supplements? It's like my meal timing. How many meals should I have? What time should I have them? What supplements should I be taking? And ultimately, I mean, we want to look at the food quality, right? Like, what foods am I mostly choosing? Then we can look at the quantity, then the macro breakdown, And then kind of all the little weird stuff is at the top. And I think that 99% of the people never need to get to that top pyramid of the minute details, when the larger picture is really kind of that baseline that needs to be addressed first, and is easier. I guess when you think about human nature, people are probably asking about those things because they're hoping that if they master this one like trick, that it will unlock everything for them and be a quick fix.
Mhm.
But really, it's kind of those foundational habits that would make the biggest difference, but take more time. And most people aren't that patient.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of point to end on. I think as that we could all do better at mastering the foundations and the basics and the lifestyle factors that are involved in nutrition. And it's not just about what you put in your mouth, and it's about a kind of more holistic approach to health that we could all be doing a little bit better with, and focusing less on the kind of minor details that maybe, or that certainly like high level athletes have to focus on, and that's maybe where the confusion comes in, because if people are being influenced by high level athletes and they look up to them, it's because these athletes have done all of the things underneath, and now
Right.
they focus on those things. Whereas the everyday athlete, CrossFitter,
Might be starting there because that's what they see.
I want to go straight to the top.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah. Okay. So that gives people some sort of things to go away and kind of work on. And yeah, Savannah says if you have any questions that we haven't got around to answering, pop Savannah an email and she'll be happy to get back to you. And maybe we can do this again sometime with some more like specific topics, because I feel like it was valuable. Hopefully everybody did as well. Cool.
Thank you guys for joining.
Yes, thanks everybody, and thanks so much for everybody's comments. That was really nice to feel like it wasn't just Savannah and I chatting. Like, I really enjoyed reading all the comments and feeling like we're all in a room together.
Yeah. You guys are pretty funny too, so thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Savannah. I am going to get to my bed because it's 10 past 10 here.
All right. Good night. Thanks, Jo.
Good night. Bye.